Publishers are asking for higher stakes, which means agents are asking for higher stakes, which means writers are thinking, how do I have the highest stakes possible in my romance? When people say raise the stakes, we often think about, okay, like their life is going to be in danger, or their job's going to be in danger, or the world's going to be in danger, right? It's like, raise the stakes. Let me go send an asteroid tumbling towards Earth. And you can do that as well. Check out Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Part of the reason that book was so good, so genius, was the fact that we're hearing about this love story knowing that these characters are in jeopardy. We can't all do that. We can't all create life and death stakes around our romance to make the romance feel more important, if that makes sense. We can't all do that. So instead, what writers have done is put our characters in the public eye. Donald Mass's book, Writing the Breakout Novel, which I highly recommend, he talks a lot about stakes. He talks about personal stakes and he talks about public stakes. Now, he was talking a lot about extending and making the scope of the story so large that the result of the story was speaking to humanity as a whole, not just the characters. And with books like sports romances and reality TV romances, that's what we're doing. Because what's different now from, the 2000s and 2010s is that we all care a lot about how we're perceived online. We care a lot about likes, followers, engagement. And we care a lot about our reputations. So by making the romances more visible and by making the romances more visible, by creating characters who are inherently meaningful to the fictional audience in their world, we're implicitly upping the stakes because we implicitly understand the need to appeal and to do well and to not be canceled in that kind of setting. It's kind of the difference between dating someone and dating someone knowing there's a commentator on TikTok or the people at ET Canada or whatever are going to be reporting on your every move. You know what I mean? It ups this pressure just a little bit. Whether it's in a sports arena, whether they're celebrities, or whether they are on reality TV or whatever it is. So there are more eyes around them. Now we understand that how we're perceived, particularly online, but how we're perceived by others, by an audience, that's really high stakes in our society. You can get canceled for something you say online. You know what I mean? And so that brings us to this era of how do I have my stakes without creating blood and murder and life or death, an asteroid coming towards Earth. And the answer for many, many writers is make fictional people care about my character. Create a fictional audience that my character has to answer to. Create an arena of such that the character is acting in, that this romance is happening in, where the romance could affect how they're perceived, where the romance could be discovered, or the romance is in light. And just because there's a light shining on it, just because it's very, very visible to our fictional audience, that increases the importance, the pressure, the stakes that our real audience feels. A great example of this, and I'm going to go through this, I have a Substack on this that I'm going to link below. I do lots of book deep dives on my Substack as well as writing updates. I'm currently doing a thing where I wake up at 7 in the morning and write in bed, so I can't vlog that. So instead, I've been doing little Substack updates. So if you're interested in that, go take a look. I'll link it all down below. But we're going to talk about The Favorites, which was one of my favorite books of 2025. Haha. This book I could not put down. Like literally, I was on the couch and I was at like 12 p.m. and I was like, oh, I got to get up. I have to go get dressed. And I would reach the end of a chapter and I literally could not stop. This is the effect that we all want our books to have. So The Favorites is about a skating couple, a figure skating couple. So it's a little bit of a sports romance. It was marketed more as women's fiction, but I think that it's exactly what we want in terms of, okay, what are the stakes here? So it's about a girl and her boyfriend who are an ice dancing pair. We up the stakes in the hook a little bit. They are competitive ice skaters. We up it again. They're so competitive, they go to the Olympics. We up it one more time. It's actually 10, 15 years after they went to the Olympics. And there's a documentary being released about famed skaters Kat and Heath. Kat has refused to be a part of this documentary, and this book is her telling the story in her own way on her own time. Does that make sense? So it's not just, it starts, and the core of the story is this love story between this couple who are in the figure skating world, which is already, hey, sports, that's already upping the stakes. They've added something onto that, which is this documentary. And how the book is formatted is every so often in the prose, which is from Kat's POV, there's snippets of the documentary. Basically, it's basically the transcript of the documentary will be in there. And there's different journalists and coaches and things commenting and making comments that are relevant to what just happened in the story. What this does for us, it's a framing device, but it works incredibly well. It is giving the story a larger than life feel. It's showing us that what happens in this story that we're reading will reverberate through the future, will have consequences, and will be something that people care about and talk about forever. It's not real, obviously. It's not like anybody is watching this documentary. It's the same with Daisy Jones and the Six, where just because they're fictional celebrities, we kind of care and are interested a little bit more because we know that there's, even though it's fictional people who like them and who care about them and who are interested in them and fangirling over them and whatever, it's still other people. And so for some reason, it tricks our brains into caring about them a little bit more. There's a psychology thing of we like people that other people like, and that is very oversimplified, I think, and not always true. However, it is helpful in books. Every moment in the story feels important because it's going to be dissected and discussed 10 years later by these people in these transcripts. It also allows a lot of curiosity seeds to be planted organically, and it allows us to step outside the main character's head to see her performance, which is as well really cool, and a cool way that they deal with, again, a problem in something like a sports romance or a reality TV show is that we can only see from the character's perspective. We can't see from what the audience is seeing. So this gives us the opportunity to kind of describe what the audience, fictional audience, is seeing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use the favorites as a case study, and we're going to look at the opening to it and talk about how the setup, the framing narrative, etc., raises the stakes and creates very high stakes, compelling promises with no blood and no murder. If you were on my community tab, you know this is a poll I put out a couple of weeks ago asking which one you'd like to hear about the most. So here we are. So we start with an unlabeled prologue. It is a prologue. It's just unlabeled. And there's 4 paragraphs where Katarina Shaw, who's our MC, speaks directly to the reader, and she announces she's going to tell her story. The first line of the book, the whole book and the prologue is, "Today is the 10th anniversary of the worst day of my life." And then the curiosity seed we get is, "By now I've heard it all. Katarina Shaw is a diva, a sore loser, a manipulative liar, cold-blooded, a criminal, an attention whore, an actual whore, even a murderess." That's very interesting. So at this point, we're setting up this person as, we're hearing directly from her, but she is hinting at all of these things she's been called. And obviously it makes us think, why? Why has she been called a sore loser? Why has she been called cold-blooded? Why has she been called a murderess? Why has she been called an attention whore? When it gets getting the questions going in our head. Also, she's already alluding to the fact that other people care about her. Other people have called her these things. This is what she's been called in the headlines. And then the last line is, "We'll see who wins in the end." And part of the reason this is women's fiction and not considered a sports romance, even though it is a sports romance, is this focus on that question of which part of the story will we believe? Which part of who really is this woman? And we as the readers are given the opportunity to, decide that for ourselves as we read the book. So as we're reading this, we're wondering, why are these dancers so popular? What was the worst day of her life? What will I think of her when I finish the story? It also sets up, those questions that it sets up are very specific, and it's also setting up the major dramatic question, which again, the secondary major dramatic question is really, will she and Heath get together in the end? Another secondary question is, will Kat win a gold medal? But the reason this is that women's fiction is the major dramatic question, which is, who really is this famous ice dancer and what is the truth behind the fame? That is what this documentary bit is elevating us to. And while this book leans into that a little bit more, again, it was marketed more as women's fiction. So I'm sorry that doesn't match the title of the video, but it is a sports romance. It's sports romances and reality TV shows that have that aspect too. It's like, what is the public seeing versus what is going on privately? That's a huge part of the intrigue and the hook in those. So we have a mystery set up here, a little bit more than a will they, won't they. We have a book with multiple versions of the truth, and we are curiosity seated up. So the next thing we see is an interstitial. This is a transcript of the trailer for the documentary. So first we see the trailer, and it's very obvious it's a trailer because there's these italicized narrative lines describing what you see on screen. The first line is, narrator, they were an obsession. The best curiosity seed is, slow dissolve to a photo of the ice rink in Sochi. Bright red splatters stains the Olympic rings. Ooh. And the last line is from Ellis Dean. I know one thing for sure. There'll never be another team like Kat and Heath. And you know what? Maybe that's a good thing. That's the trailer. This is setting up those stakes, the fact that there's the fictional people who care about them. It helps us see the importance of the narrative by giving us context. It also creates promises. This is a love story. This is juicy. There will be blood. Things will go wrong. The visual of the blood on the Olympic rings is incredible. But this story does not have any murder or violence or anything in it, really. It's a human story with, athletes. But just that kind of hint of, oh, there's blood here is interesting. Now, I think you have to be very careful with that as a writer. If you promise blood and murder and then there's nothing, if the wrong promises are set up, you risk disappointing the reader or making them confused and thinking it's like a murder book, where this is not. But they do a good job, and it's a tough balance to walk, but it does a good job of focusing on Kat and Heath as kind of the focus, and then as this, it's clearly the story is going to be about Kat and Heath, and then there are these other things going on, and maybe their romance leads to this blood, but the blood is not the purpose, right? They make it clear it's not a murder mystery. And then we go into chapter 1. Our first narrative chapter is from Kat's POV. Kat and Heath are carving their names into her bed frame, talking about the upcoming competition and making out. The first line is, once I was satisfied, I handed him the knife. Okay, this is another one of those little bait and switches. Some readers might not like this. I did. Because right away we find out that the knife is to carve into the bed frame. It's the next sentence. It just draws you in, and then you're like, oh, okay. It wasn't cheap. The author wasn't lying to us, but it wasn't exactly what it seemed. And I think that also sets up promises for the rest of the book as like, okay, someone is going to die. There might be some blood, but like it's not what it seems. The best curiosity seed is, I was right, just not in the way I imagined. So that is the last line of the chapter, or one of the last lines of the chapters. And she says something about her and Heath. And so this is a past tense POV with a clear narrative voice looking back at her younger self. And this is one of her intruding comments where she says, oh, I was right, just not in the way I imagined. The last line is, by the time we heard the footsteps, it was too late. So with this women's fiction romance story, she's really taking techniques from thrillers and putting them in here to keep us turning the pages. So by the time we heard the footsteps, it was too late. I think an important thing to remember when we're writing is that, for example, I just wrote a scene where a couple was about to get caught making out. And you have to write that the same way you would write an action scene, because where they're running away from a police chase or whatever, because their hearts are still pounding, they're still freaking out, they're still trying to figure out what to do. It's the same amount of tension and action as you would have in like a full-on action scene. And so I think that's a good lesson to take here too. And that is also why sports romances I think are so popular, because they're able to infuse that action bit with the sports scenes. It also sports scenes bring up really high emotions. Part of the reason I really like kind of your action adventure romances is there's high emotions. People are running for their lives, and it's really fun to write romance in that setting. Same with sports. Same with a little bit reality TV. They can do some crazy stuff. Maybe that one is a little less fair, but with that heightened emotion, with those crazy situations that these characters are in, it can be a really like strong, tense environment, and writing romance in intensity is really, really fun. So, basically, the author of this book goes on to write an incredible story where the last sentence of every chapter propels you forward, the same way a murder mystery or action adventure would, leaving it on something of a cliffhanger. And none of it is like, and then they fell off the cliff or anything like that, but it is using those techniques to raise the stakes and create a page turning, high propensity romance read. So I would love to hear from you. What do you think about this trend in high visibility romances? Does it change what you want to write? Do you like them? Do you not like them? And do you think I'm right about the reasons for why we're seeing this? Thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm Nicole Wilbur. If you want to talk about stories with me and try to tell our best ones together, check out my Substack or subscribe below. Also hit the like button. All of the things. So many fun things to do. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.